Hello, everyone. How are you all? It's a Friday afternoon, and it's another History Chap live. Welcome. I see we've got folk already making their comments over there. So, hello to Rich John, the guy from SETI Alpha. Lovely to see you here as well as ever. Tim Goddard, thank you very much. And you're coming in from Flanders. Fantastic, across the water there. Jen Ingle, another loyal supporter. Thank you very much, Jen, for all your support. And you're now looking at the snowy fells in Cumbria. Raining here in Worcester. We haven't had any snow, but there you go. Sunny Bletchley. Sarah Jane, lovely to see you again. And now we've got the Americans coming in. Lawrence, hi from from San Francisco. Folk who are watching, just tell me where you are in the world. I've interesting. I recently looked at my analytics on YouTube, and last month I had people from 90 countries watching my videos, which is pretty amazing. Obviously, the real biggies: UK, USA, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. They're the top five. Just behind them, we've got South Africa and Republic of Ireland. And then we start to get all sorts of folks. Quite a strong contingent from Germany. I've got Trevor over in Sweden, in Gothenburg, I think it is, might be Stockholm. But we've got, I know we've got folk from the Philippines. So yeah, where are folk coming from? Rich John, you're in Warwickshire. Nice to see you. Just across the border from Worcestershire. Austria, lovely to see you from Austria. Mid-Missouri, Jefferson City. Good morning from Chicago. A soggy Northamptonshire. South Carolina, Leslie, nice to see you, and good to see you all. Thank you very much. Spain, funny enough, Sir Fox, the rain in Spain. So it's lovely to have you all here. For those people who don't know and maybe have come across the History Chat through some of my other videos, this is a bit of a free, this is a free for all. This is live. There's no script. There are no lovely images, mainly because YouTube don't allow you, currently YouTube Lives, you can't put images on. You can buy some other software, but I've got other things to do with my life, like researching and telling great stories rather than faffing about with technology all at the time. And for me, technology does take a lot of time. So this is a bit jazz. This is an opportunity for you to post comments, post questions, questions to me, questions to everyone else. It's an opportunity for you to share any pet theories. I'll throw in some questions. We'll have a bit of a debate. And yeah, it's sort of a bit more interactive than my normal videos. It's also going to be a little bit shorter this week because I am desperately trying to get a video out. It was going to be out last night. I fell way behind. It's quite a long video, half an hour this time. So quite a good one. I'll tell you about it in a moment. All right. But so we're going to have to keep it a little bit tighter, more 30, 40 minutes today rather than the full hour. Sorry, folks. On the other hand, I'm sure you've got other things you can get on with wherever you are in the world. Someone's throwing up here. Charles Dickens was born this week. Didn't know that, actually. Thank you very much, Michael. Pete Fuller, great supporter as well. Pete from Staunton, Wisconsin. Lovely to have you on here. We've got, I think we've already mentioned Michael in Virginia. Maybe I hadn't, but Michael's just mentioned about Charles Dickens. Richard Grant in Windsor, not Worcester, do beg your pardon. There's a connection there this week in history in Windsor, or at least Windsor Castle. What about a video on Flashman? Oh, Hugh, that could be a really good one. And QA Library, thank you very much. You've just made a donation through the super chat or the down there. So thank you very much indeed for donating some money. Your trip to Portsmouth. I have jury service soon. Oh, I did jury service once, and it was as boring as hell. Some people get really meaty cases, and I was the reserve for 3 days, sat there as the reserve. You get called in, and they basically select the jury out of the rogues gallery, and I got basically sent back 3 times. So I sat there reading the newspaper and that, which is, I have to say, tedious. And then finally got put into a case which cracked. The bloke then pleaded guilty. And at the end of the week, they said, you don't need to come back and you've done your civic service. So there you go. So anyway, I hope you enjoy your jury service, and it's a little bit more eventful than mine. Christopher, sorry to be late. Don't worry, this is just an opportunity to drop in and out. So, but thank you very much for joining me anyway. I was just saying to everyone else, this is going to be a little bit shorter than normal because I'm trying to get this week's video out. Sarah Jane has put rest in peace, Ian Lavender. Of course, Ian Lavender, the last of the cast or the central cast of Dad's Army. And I did 3 videos about the characters from Dad's Army last year. They were really successful. And in fact, that's actually spun a series of talks that I now do. And I was doing one last Saturday, in fact, in Cheshire for a church fundraiser up at Cuddington, and it was a sellout crowd. You know, they said to me, "Oh, you're a sellout crowd," and there were people from other history societies and that I've spoken to in the Cheshire Northwest area, and they turned up. It was like, "Oh, we wanted to see you again." It was a bit embarrassing. It was like that was like the second coming. Anyway, where we are, the German liner General von Steuben was torpedoed and sunk in the Baltic Sea, and 4,000 died. The Unknown Titanic. I guess that was this week, and that is a phenomenal story. It was, I think it was principally, and you might tell me otherwise, I think it was principally there was some troops on it being evacuated from the Baltic, maybe East Prussia, as the Russians advanced, the Soviets advanced. A lot of civilians on it as well, and yeah, you're right, it was torpedoed, and 4,000 people drowned in the Baltic, the cold waters of the Baltic. Which is nearly 3 times as many people as drowned on the Titanic. So yeah, and amazing, isn't it? You know, Titanic everyone talks about, no one talks about that one. Torpedoed by a Russian sub. Yeah, it was. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Jim. So in QL Library, I've been given a 2-week slot in late February. Yeah, as I say, I was sent home after the first week of my jury service, which is great. And you sort of get I was going to say get out of jail free card is probably the wrong term to use with jury service, but yeah, once you've done it, you don't get called back for some time. So yeah, and haven't been called back since. Right, folks, let me kick off actually with the first of the events for this week that happened in British history in this week. So if we trawl back to Sunday, I tend to come through by the days of the week rather than by the years. So, but we're going back a long time actually. Sunday, or the 4th of February in modern days. Don't forget, calendars have changed over the years, but 4th of February in the modern day, 4th of Feb, 211 AD. Roman Emperor Septimius Severus dies in York. So Septimius Severus, really interesting guy, Roman Emperor, born in modern day Libya. So probably darker skinned than a lot of Italians and darker skinned than a lot of Celts and people in the Roman Empire up in York. But people have called him the Black Emperor. I think there's a bit of a debate. Most people that I know from North Africa generally aren't massively black, but they are African. And yeah, so he, as I say, he came from Libya. He was a successful Roman general. Actually, he was a military man. And in 193 AD, when the Emperor Commodus was killed, and for those of you who are fans of the film Gladiator with Russell Crowe, Commodus, the Mad Emperor, this is the Commodus we're talking about. He was a real character, and he was murdered, not by a gladiator in a showdown in the Colosseum, but he was murdered. It was the loss of quite a few Roman emperors. Roman politics was really violent, and he was murdered. And Septimius Severus actually marched his legion into Rome and seized power shortly afterwards. And he was to rule from, for 18 years in Rome. So 208 BC, he rocks up in Britannia, which was a large part of Britain. Britannia was a Roman province in the Roman Empire. And he turned up and he had his 2 sons with him as well, Caracalla and Geta. He spent the next 3 years campaigning beyond Hadrian's Wall, so into Scotland, and actually with quite some success. And he went quite a long way up, and he was really the last Roman general or Roman military expedition to have significant success in what's now Scotland, in the land of the sort of the Caledonii and later the Picts. So And in 211, he died in the city of Eboracum, which is modern day York. And interesting, those of you who are into horse racing at all, the York races every year there's quite a famous race in York at the York race course called the Ebor, Ebor, which are the first four letters of the of Eboracum, the Roman city. So there you go. If next time you go to the York races, you can bore everyone by saying, "Oh, I know where the name of this one comes from." He was succeeded in. He bequeathed the empire to his two sons to split it between them or to rule it between them. Well, siblings never get on well. They don't get on well where there's a house or some family silver, let alone a whole empire up for grabs. So Caracalla killed Geta in while they were still in Britannia and seized the whole empire for himself. And Septimius Severus's family were to rule the empire for another 25 years. Septimius Severus wasn't the only Roman emperor to come to Britain. We had Hadrian, of course, who built Hadrian's Wall. About 80 years after the Roman conquest, he had turned up in Britain to build Hadrian's Wall. We also, interestingly, had another one called Constantine Chorus. He, funny enough, also died in Eboracum in York, and his son was proclaimed emperor in Eboracum, and his son became Constantine the Great. One of the great Roman emperors, and Constantine, of course, was the emperor who took or who made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. And of course, there was another Roman emperor who came to the shores of Britain in 43 AD. Britain was successfully invaded by the Romans, and this Roman invasion was under the command, in theory, of the Emperor Claudius. And Claudius actually came to Britain to sort of, put some finishing touches to the invasion and to prove his military credentials. And funny enough, the reason that today's live is going to be a little bit shorter than normal is because I'm putting the finishing touches to a video all about that Roman invasion of Britain in AD 43. Claudius is going to be there. Claudius is there. He turns up with war elephants. And amazing, there was a massive battle down in Kent, the Battle of Medway, not Midway, Pacific, Second World War, Medway, Medway, which is a river in Kent. The Romans had landed in East Kent, just like effectively they had when Julius Caesar had turned up in Britain 100 years beforehand. They marched through Kent and came to the River Medway. And they're drawn up on the River Medway, facing the 40,000 Romans, pretty sizable. Claudius wasn't messing around with this particular invasion, was he? But there were up to 100,000 Britons on the west bank of the Medway. And it was an almighty battle. The battle took 2 days, which in ancient warfare, it was very rare. Battles didn't last that long, and really shows how the Brits really realized this was a do or die battle. And long and short, the British lost, or the Britons lost, and it became a rout. And it paved the way for the rest of the Roman invasion, because the Britons never fielded an army of anything near that size again during the Roman invasions. And within two years, they'd got as far as Exeter down in the southeast, had established a fort in Exeter. But within 2 years, they certainly there's archaeological evidence that they were at Ulster, which I can't remember who said they were from Warwickshire, but someone said they're from Warwickshire. Well, Ulster is top end of Warwickshire, heading towards Birmingham. They'd got a fort there. And certainly by 47 AD, so within 4 years, they'd extended Roman authority up to Shropshire and across the Humber estuary. So and there was more to come, as we've been talking about with Septimius Severus there. So anyway, I'm going to be working on that one this evening. It's today, and it should be coming out later today. Okay, so that's part of the reason for wanting to keep things a little bit tight, and I hope you enjoy it. And Jen has just made a good one, because there were two other generals in the army that there were several generals who came in that invading army, two of whom were to go on to become Roman emperors in their own right, Geta and Vespasian. Vespasian actually played a crucial role in that Battle of Medway, and he was the Roman general who then swept down through the south and southwest of England, including taking out the hill forts at places like Maiden Castle and establishing that fort at Exeter. And Vespasian technically wasn't an emperor when he was in Britain, but he went on to become an emperor, and again, one of the great Roman emperors. So there you go. Excuse me very much, Uncle Heavy. I was very young when the series I, Claudius was first aired on the BBC. I remember watching that. Thank you very much for a trip down memory lane there, Uncle Heavy. Has anyone else seen I, Claudius? I forgot. Derek Jacobi was Claudius, wasn't he? And he was sort of this stuttering fool. I mean, he was elevated. We don't want to go down Roman history too much, but of course he was elevated to the throne after the mad Caligula had his nephew had been murdered by his own bodyguard, the Praetorian Guard, and they basically they had to put someone on the throne, and to a certain extent, Claudius was the last man from the imperial family still standing, and he was a bit of a buffoon by all accounts, or is seen as a bit of a buffoon by all accounts, and partly that was a large part of why he invaded Britain. It was to give himself some credibility, and isn't that amazing? Political leaders through history ever since then have done similar things and have had wars or invaded countries to build credentials right up to the modern times. Fascinating. I, Claudius, Invisible Ray, great. As I say, I remember it being good. Whether it is good, I don't know. I've not seen it since. But Roman history, fascinating. But I mean, very, very complicated as well. And of course, went on for a long time. Britain was invaded in AD 43 and basically became part of the Roman Empire for 400 years, which, if you put that into context, 400 years, the United States of America hasn't been a country for 400 years. Neither is obviously, 400 years ago, white settlers had only just arrived in South Africa. 400 years ago, there certainly weren't any white settlers in New Zealand or Australia. And that was how long Britain was part of the Roman Empire, and it left legacies of all sorts, not just ruins and stuff around in Britain, places like Chester and Roxter, but obviously it introduced, say, Christianity as one thing to Britain as well, with Saint Alban, Britain's proto-martyr, first martyr. So anyway, I could be on. Thomas, I'm just going to see if I can. Would you believe there's something here? Can you please tell all your international viewers why Manchester is the best city in the world? Oh, Thomas, I have to say I'm a bit of a Birmingham fan myself, so you're gonna have to wait there. But of course, Thomas, one thing just tying in with all this, of course, people from Manchester called Manx or Mancunians, and Mancunian was the name of the Roman fort at modern day Manchester. And of course, anything with a word, for those of you, especially outside of Britain, any British towns, and they tend to be English towns, that have the word Chester at the end of them, that indicates a Roman fort. Roman settlement, but principally it's a Roman fort. That's where it actually settled. So we have places like Cirencester, Gloucester. We have Chester, of course. That's the big one. But also we have Manchester. So yeah, go around, take a map of Britain. Anywhere you see Chester at the end of it, Toaster, etc. It's a Roman fort. Colchester was the very first one, of course. So there we go. And where are we at? Leyton Orient is the best team ever, says Invisible Ray. Well, hopefully you saw my video about the football battalions in the First World War, which were professional footballers who all signed up almost like PALS battalions, and they were it wasn't just footballers, it was also football fans who joined with them. They were used as almost like a PR tool, join and join your players, the men you go and support every Saturday. And there were 2 battalions in the Middlesex Regiment of the football battalions, and of course there was McRae's famous battalion up in Scotland, made up of a lot of men from Heart of Midlothian Football Club. Other footballers joined in, places like amazing like Hibs, They're big rivals in Edinburgh. So anyway, if you're a Leyton Orient fan, check that one out. The Football Battalions. Strangely, it didn't get a lot of viewings actually. Well, comparatively, I thought it was fascinating, and it touches on other characters from the First World War. People like Walter Tull, obviously first black man ever to become an officer in the British Army, but it was also had some other really interesting stories as well, including Joe Mercer, not Joe Mercer of Manchester City fame, his dad, who played for England and Nottingham Forest, and he basically came back. I think he was gassed, or he was injured and never played again after the First World War. Anyway, what happened to the whiskers? Oh, I got rid of them. They weren't me. I'm afraid. Saved a lot of time not shaving, but there you go. Thank you very much. And Sarah Jane just said, similar to the Football Battalions, my granddad joined up with local church lads brigade, and he was the only one to come back from his group. I mean, the First World War. As a matter of interest, which war are people more interested in? First World War or Second World War? Put your comments in, okay? Because really, it's interesting because I think there's some great stories from the First World War. There's obviously some great ones from the Second World War, because Second World War is closer to a lot of us. Probably grandfathers or even fathers were in it, or have stories to tell from it as well. First World War slightly further back. Both World War One, time savings. Both World War One, says Leslie. Yeah, interesting. Both wars. I'm a military history Kirk, says Jim, and that's actually one of the other things I'd like to maybe share with you is when we do these weekly things. We tend to talk a lot about British history generally, don't we? Not just military. And I'm intrigued as to whether you like me telling those slightly wider stories in British history, or whether you just want battles. Okay, there's a friend of mine over in California, and he says, Chris, all they want to know is the size of the battle axe. And I don't know, do you like just your military stories, or do you like, and I do tell my military stories, but they do tend to have a broader context as well, don't they? But I don't think I'll ever be talking about costume and things like that. But, should I be telling stories about things like Septimius Severus, for instance? Interestingly, by the way, let's keep going. What's happened in British history? 4th of February, 1884, the Battle of El Teb in Sudan. And that's, of course, part of the great, long history, the British in Sudan, long history in the 1880s, 1890s. And of course, I've done a video about the Battle of El Teb, and I've put a link down below. Okay, so if you fancy watching a bit of, it was all in the time of Gordon of Khartoum, and it was sort of part of trying to sort of create a rescue effort for Gordon. I'm putting it very, very basically there, okay? And don't shoot me down for it. You'll see the amount of videos I have on Sudan. I know Sudan history and British history in Sudan pretty well. It's one of my passions, and it's a bit more complicated than that, but not for now. But basically, they were trying to take a bit of pressure off the, or prove that the British government were trying to prove they were doing something to rescue Gordon of Khartoum, trying to prove it to the British public and to the press, get them off their back. And again, funny, isn't it? 120 odd years, 140 years later, governments do that sort of thing as well. It's all about the show, isn't it? And Gladstone was doing it back in the 1880s. It's nothing new. Let me just have a look here. And there's one of the lovely things I like doing on this is just responding to all your contents. History of daylight saving. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's an interesting one. I like the social and the personal stories. Jen, you've been a great supporter, and you've come up with many good ideas in the past, one of which, of course, Theodore Hardy, Britain's World War I chaplain, awarded the Victoria Cross, was your idea. I'd never heard of Theodore Hardy until you told me about him, but what a fascinating and incredible man he was. Of course, died in the First World War. But and it was off him that we ended up with Woodbine Willie, another great chaplain who survived the First World War. I did a video about him as well. Sarah Jane, always like the personal stories. Seeing the Greys made me think of their own story. Thank you. I like you to talk both civil and military history, Chris. Thank you very much, Jim. Hopefully I get the there's some fascinating stories, I think, in British history. And it's not all about battles. But I was doing one this week actually for a. In fact, actually, it ties in. Here we go. 6th of February, 1665, the future Queen Anne is born. She was born at St. James's Palace. She was the daughter of the future James II and his first wife, Anne Hyde. And she was the last of the Stuart monarchs of England, well, England and Scotland. And I was doing a talk about her this week. And what was interesting was that this was to an organisation called Restless, which tends to be for senior retired folk, and it's all different stuff, not just history. You can learn belly dancing if you want. There's astronomy. There's all sorts of stuff on there. There's walks around London. Loads and loads of stuff. And I'm one of their sort of more popular history speakers. I know you find that hard to believe, but I've just done a series on the Stuarts for the Restless community, and we were talking about Queen Anne this week. And what was interesting was, obviously, I talked about the Battle of Blenheim and the Duke of Marlborough and his campaigns. But what was also interesting was just, I spent quite a lot of time talking about the Act of Union, finally politically brought England and Scotland together. And just both the political reasons why the English wanted to have a union, and the commercial reasons why some of the Scots wanted a union, and all the skullduggery, because actually in Scotland, the idea of a union with the English was not popular. And fundamentally, there were certain Scots that felt there was commercial advantages to having free trade with England because it would line their pockets, which is, we all have reasons for voting for or against things, don't we, in politics and anything else. And but some of them, it was a bit more overt. They were basically bribed by the government to vote for union. And so, really interesting stories. So I love those sort of stories. It's got nothing to do with a battle per se. Although, of course, England and Scotland have had plenty of battles against each other and within them. And of course, there was going to be further trouble when the Jacobite rebellions took place in both 1715 and the big one in 1745. And I'm going to cover both of those this year. I will be covering some of those sort of stories from this Stuart/Georgian period of British history. I thought Battle of Sedgemoor will be in there as well. Monmouth's rising against James II, Queen Anne's dad, the last Catholic king of England. So there we go. That was we're moving on swiftly here. Let me look back at where we're all at here. Your enthusiasm is such that I'm interested in all aspects. That's very kind of you. And of course, that's how I started back in COVID days. Some of you have heard the story, won't bore you, but fundamentally, twiddling my thumbs in COVID, didn't know what to do. We were all in lockdown. My public speaking business had gone to the wall. No one wanted public speaking coaching. And some of my friends basically said, you always have a bloody story to tell. And they're fascinating. We're in the pub and you'll tell a story about why the name of the pub or who the person was in this pub, pub. And they said, why don't you just tell some bloody stories on YouTube? And that's how it all started. My very first one was about the plague village of Eyam in Derbyshire, which was this plague village that got the plague in the last great outbreak of bubonic plague in England in 1665-66, again in the Stuart period. And this little village actually decided, rather than running, they would actually go into their own self-imposed quarantine so that they did not spread the plague in the north of England. And they didn't spread the plague in the north of England, but well over a third of them died of the plague, bubonic plague. Brave people, ordinary people, farmers, lead miners, haberdashers, just normal folk taking their own initiative. What an inspiring story. And it was very pertinent during COVID. There you go. Anyway, back to where we're at now. What we got? Can you do a video about how many wars Billy Harnell played Grumpy Sergeant? Okay, thank you, Invisible Ray. That's a good idea. Ooh. Poor horses. I like the mix of civil and military history. Thank you very much. Cummins Archive. Someone's saying Charlie Manson said something very fascinating. Let me just go back here. Charlie Manson. My granddad's family were travellers, so didn't need to serve as they had no birth certificates and hence not bonded to the country. Interesting. I also heard, actually, Charlie, that a lot of travellers community, Romany community in particular, did serve in the First World War. And a lot of them were in the yeomanry, very good with horses. So, yeah, interesting. Interesting. And of course, any of you who are fans of Peaky Blinders know that the Shelby family, and of course, Tommy Shelby is in Peaky Blinders, decorated in the First World War. He's actually a miner in the First World War, as in tunneling underneath the German positions and positioning mines. And yeah, the Shelbys were from a traveller or Romany family. So, but there you go. And that's an interesting story as well. Peaky Blinders, the real Peaky Blinders. There's some fascinating history there. And I was very fortunate to actually be taught by Carl Chin when I was at university. Carl Chin is an expert on Birmingham history, Birmingham like social history, and he was the historic advisor to Peaky Blinders. But some really interesting stuff there, and indeed about all the other gangs that existed in Britain, in working class Britain, in the back end of the 1800s. And partly to stop these gangs, and there were people like the Peaky Blinders were actually in Birmingham in the 1890s, nothing to do with the Shelbys and mafia style gang in the 1920s. They were just a bunch of thugs in Birmingham in the 1880s, 1890s. But they had others. I think in Birmingham they were called the Sloggers. They were another group, and it was because of actually the Manchester gangs that a church in Manchester decided to set up a football team, football, to a bit like boxing clubs existed, to try and put people on the straight and narrow, keep them away from crime. And this football club was set up, and it became Manchester City eventually. So there you go. And that was all in a response to Peaky Blinder style thuggery that was happening in Victorian Britain. God, I tell you what, if you got stuck in a car with me on a long journey, your head would explode, wouldn't it? Right, let's get back to British history this week. 7th of February, 1554, the Battle of Fleet Street. In Tudor England, Battle of Fleet Street. This was actually an uprising during the reign of Mary I. Mary I, Catholic monarch, daughter of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. She succeeded her brother, Edward VI, and she was on the throne, and there was basically an uprising. She was Catholic in a Protestant country. She wanted to marry the King of Spain, Philip, who ultimately was to send the Armada against England. And that didn't go down well. And in fact, actually, there was a rising. There was supposed to be a rising in three parts of England: the West Country, the Midlands, and Kent. The only one that got off the ground was the one in Kent, led by a man called Sir Thomas Wyatt. Wyatt marched on London with about 4,000 Protestant supporters, principally from Kent, and they tried to enter the City of London. The City of London, under Queen Mary's orders, but closed all its gates, and they tried to storm the gate at Fleet Street. And the subsequent Battle of Fleet Street took place. It was a bit of a walkover. I mean, you had soldiers versus farmhands from Kent. I mean, it was only going to end in one way, wasn't it? And indeed, it was. Many were killed, many captured. In fact, they had so many captured rebels that they didn't have enough room in the jails in the centre in the City of London for the rebels that checked to house them in churches, guarded, obviously. And Sir Thomas Wyatt was executed. Mary and her ministers, in particular her ministers, were desperate to implicate Mary's sister, the Protestant Princess Elizabeth. And even though he was tortured, Wyatt never said that Elizabeth was part of the plot. The plot was to put Elizabeth on the throne, but she always swore that she knew nothing about the plot. And Wyatt went to his death, never implicating Elizabeth. Although Elizabeth was put in prison prison. She was put in the Tower of London for a period, just to make sure that nothing else was going to happen. But what it did do, this rising, apart from Thomas Wyatt losing his head, it cost the life of someone else, Lady Jane Grey. Lady Jane Grey, for those of you who know your history at all, and maybe for those of you who don't, Lady Jane Grey was placed on the throne. There was an attempted coup at the end of Edward VI's reign, when Mary came to power. Protestants didn't want Catholic Mary to come to power, and they basically claimed that Edward had said that Lady Jane Grey, his cousin, a Protestant, should inherit the throne ahead of his two half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth. The plot, she was really just a patsy in the plot, and it petered out after 9 days. She was called the 9 Days Queen, but effectively her jurisdiction didn't even, well, it was London at best. Tower of London is mainly where she was holed up, and it didn't seem to exist. Her power didn't go any much further than that, because strangely enough, Protestant England at that time swung behind Mary as the rightful queen. And so anyway, Lady Jane Grey, Mary actually took a bit of pity on her, thought that, you know, she'd been set up by rich men, elderly men who were looking for their own power. And she saw Lady Jane Grey as she was a teenager, and she was seen as, you know, Mary. She was put in the Tower of London, in prison there, but she was seen as Mary took a bit of sympathy on her. This rising was a step too far. Lady Jane Grey had nothing to do with it, but you could not have Protestant heroes or heroines incarcerated who could be rescued and be a rallying point for a Protestant cause. So Lady Jane Grey was executed. And as I say, some of Mary's ministers were really keen to have a very similar fate for her half-sister Elizabeth, but that wasn't to happen. So there we go. That was the 7th of February, back in 1554. I tell you what, we aren't doing badly, are we? So far we've done Roman Britannia, we've done a Battle of El Teb, British Empire in Sudan, we've done Queen Anne being born. So we're into the Stuarts, and now we drop back to the Tudor England as well. So let's actually stay in Tudor England for the 8th of February. 8th of February, 1587. Mary Queen of Scots was executed at Fotheringay Castle, not far from Peterborough. And we're not going to tell the whole story of Mary Queen of Scots, but I thought we'd just have that one in there, that Mary Queen of Scots had... she'd basically been kicked off the throne of Scotland. She was related to the Tudors, and many Catholics in England. So we're going just slightly. Well, actually, no, sorry, we're going just after Mary Tudor. Elizabeth I was now on the throne of England, Mary's half sister. Mary Queen of Scots was seen by many English Catholics as the rightful queen, and ultimately she was conspiring, and it was seen that she was conspiring with some of those Catholic rebels to basically kill Elizabeth I and place Mary Queen of Scots on the throne of England, which would have meant that she'd have worn the crowns of England and Scotland. But it wasn't to be, because rather than wearing a crown, she had her head chopped off at Fotheringay Castle on the 8th of February 1587. And with some sort of irony, of course, she didn't wear the crowns of England and Scotland, but her son, James VI of Scotland, did. He became James I of England when Elizabeth died. The nearest claimant to the throne was Mary Queen of Scots' son. And as a bit of a one-over on Queen Elizabeth, she's actually buried. The Mary Queen of Scots is in the same, they're entombed in the same chapel as Queen Elizabeth I at Westminster Abbey. James, when he became king, removed his mother, Mary Queen of Scots, who had been buried at Peterborough Cathedral, moved her to Westminster Abbey, put her in the same chapel as Elizabeth I, and made her tomb ever so slightly bigger. It's a bit of a one-over for his mum on Elizabeth I. There we go. Let's have a little look here. Have we got anything else? People have gone quiet. Maybe everyone's gone to sleep. Who knows? Siege of Sydney Street. It's on my list, actually. Not going to happen soon, but the Siege of Sydney Street is. I wouldn't mind telling the story of the Battle of. I've just had a mental block. The Battle of Cable Street, which is a bit later in East End history. I think East End history is absolutely, it's fascinating, political, social, everything. I mean, you've got the Whitechapel murders, you've got William Booth setting up the Salvation Army there, loads of really interesting stuff from the Battle of Cable Street from the 1930s, of course, with the British, an attempted march by the British Union of Fascists through Whitechapel, through the Jewish area of East London. So loads of really interesting stuff, from the Second World War. Of course, very interesting as well, massive Huguenot population. French Huguenots settled around Spitalfields. And, that was probably one of the first big immigrant influxes England had ever had. And I was reading it when I visited the Museum of London once, the amount of Londoners, obviously principally talking white Londoners, I guess, but the amount of Londoners who can trace their have Huguenot blood in their veins it was a huge number, absolutely huge. And of course, it's very interesting that the Huguenots then spread out through the rest of England. Those of you from Birmingham, if you know Martineau Square, the Martineaus were massive civic leaders in Birmingham. I can't, God knows how many mayors and lord mayors they produced, but they were French Huguenots or French Huguenot descendants. And of course, they married into the Chamberlain family, another big Birmingham family. And while we're on Huguenot blood, by the way, Noel Chavas, VC, and Bar. Some of you have seen that story of mine from the First World War. One of only 3 men in British Army history or British military history to ever be awarded 2 Victoria Crosses. Noel Chavas, VC, from Liverpool. Chavas is a Huguenot surname as well. Fascinating. Anyway, God only knows how I ended up down that particular rabbit hole, but let's just have a quick look what the rest of you are saying. The Merthyr Tydfil Rising, yeah, another interesting one, as is the Newport Rising, as are the Newlyn riots down in Cornwall in the 1890s. That's a fascinating story as well. A British warship sent to Newlyn, the little port of Newlyn, to basically restore order with rioters in this little port in Cornwall. Fascinating story. A video or chat about the Cecils would be interesting. Yeah, I would. As a matter of interest, can I just ask a straw poll? Leslie, you put something really interesting there. I do these videos that you see, and like I'm going to be doing eventually, the one on the Roman invasion, when I finish it this afternoon for you, my normal ones, lots of pictures and stuff. How many of you would actually enjoy, as an alternative for that, a live talk like this, okay, but with just focusing on one topic, rather like a talk about the Cecils or a talk about the Merthyr Tydfil riots or the Sydney Street siege or something like that. So we wouldn't have lots of visuals. But what we would have is me talking like this and answering questions as we go, and people indeed throwing their pet theories, like maybe he did it because of this or something like that. What do you think? I mean, am I barking up the wrong tree, or would you actually quite appreciate that? Because this is one step away from being in a pub or something with me, isn't it? And having a really good chinwag. Oh, okay. There's quite a few yeses. Oops, I wish I'd said that now. One topic live from Jen Ingalls, a great idea. And of course, Jen, you've seen a few of mine on my History Chap private site for my email list. I do these sometimes from email list. Recently, I did a live one. It was all about how the Georgians ended up on the throne of Britain. Sounds good, says Kat. Thank you. Okay, let me think about that one. One of the advantages, if I do it like this, then you're all on, aren't you? That'd be super. There are no visuals. I can't physically do visuals. The best I can have is a flip chart behind me, and I can do it, which I always taught my public speaking people I was coaching. Flip charts are quite handy. They're not very artistic, but do you know what? If you can stick stuff on a flip chart, people think, blimey, he does know his stuff, doesn't he? Because he's not relying on pretty slides flashing up. Obviously, an alternative would be to do it on Zoom, where I can show slides and maps and things like that. But I don't know. Do we do it do I give you a link to go to Zoom, or do we just do something here on YouTube, a bit like this? Again, actually, just tell me that. YouTube, Zoom, just type those in if you could, because actually you're in a great position here. You're steering my work, and it's lovely having a community, but part of a community is actually people, you helping me teaching you bits of history, sharing some of my knowledge and my passion and my storytelling skills, hopefully, but you also shaping me as to how I best help you and make it fun. No Zoom. Someone else says Zoom. Don't mind. YouTube. Okay. Cool. Sorry, I'm only going quiet because I'm just actually looking. Okay, I wonder how we can do it. Yeah, okay. And if you're happy with the YouTube option, that is great. As I say, it just means we don't get the pretty pictures. But do you know what? Learning history, if we were sitting in a pub, I wouldn't have a slideshow behind me, would I? And if you were at, I've done battlefield tours, not me conducting them. I've been a participant, and I've been on battlefields. And all I have is all I've been on is there's some person, sometimes they have a couple of notes to remind them what's going on. And, they walk the battlefield. But they stand there sometimes and just tell you some of the stories. And they're fascinating. I didn't sit there thinking, oh, wish you had a PowerPoint presentation behind you, mate, because, I can't picture this battlefield at all. I've done the D-Day battlefields. I've done some of the Wars of the Roses stuff in Britain. I did one at Naseby as well, Civil War battlefield. Yeah, it's interesting. I have to say that I love doing that. And that's, again, how it all started with my friend saying, you bore us, intrigue us in the pub. You teach us, but have your viewers ever taught you anything whilst doing this YouTube channel? Yeah, they have, principally in the comments. Thank you, Welsh Muslim Dave. They tend to, in the comments, people share a lot of extra information and point out maybe books or places where I can get extra information from. So they tend to do that. Obviously, then a lot of people throw up ideas as well, which I'm always interested in new ideas, because I like the big events, but of course I love the stories behind them. And what I really like doing is telling a story and placing it into the bigger event. And so, yeah, I'm always out on the lookout for those. Can't impact YouTube growth using Zoom. Chris, I don't know on that one. Thank you very much, mate. Uncle Heavy, you're absolutely outrageous. The game would be to see how many rabbit holes we can get Chris to go down. Yeah, it's and thank you very much, Charlie, for that reminder. Please click the like button. Yeah, just on the YouTube thing, okay, let me share a little bit of what I know about YouTube, which isn't a lot. Well, and I know about putting videos on, but YouTube, basically, they promote videos and creators. By the way, that's what I'm called. I'm called a video creator. In fact, I went to the Video Creators Conference recently, got that. Look at that. That's my water bottle. Genuinely use it. But they basically, you think about it, it's they almost say, are people liking these videos? Should we show them to more people? So likes are good, including this. Okay, comments always good. And if you haven't, please subscribe to my channel, because that's seen as a good as well. Okay, they obviously also reward you by the amount of time people watch your videos for, stay on your videos, and of course nothing gets away from the fact that you've got to have an interesting video, an interesting subject, etc. in the first place, haven't you? But there you go. So I think, sorry, British American, you've just said, I think the biographical element is key to history's broad and deep appeal. I tend to agree with you. I always ask myself, and when I do my history stories, I think, what would I have done in those situations? Okay, but yeah. Right, let's head towards, I told you I was going to be 30 to 40 minutes. As ever, here we are, rolling towards 50, and I'm still going strong. So let's finish off this week in British history. Today, the 9th of February, 1892, the death of Gonville Bromhead, VC. Gonville Bromhead, of course, famously one of the two officers at Rorke's Drift at the battle in the Zulu War in 1879, awarded the Victoria Cross. Famously, Bromhead played by a young Michael Caine in the film Zulu. And he died in 1892 he was still serving in the army at that stage, 13 years after the Zulu Wars. South Welsh Borderers, as they had now become, originally the 24th Regiment of Foot, were serving in India. And he died and is buried actually at the military cemetery at Allahabad in India. And he died of, I'm not sure if he didn't die of cancer of the tongue. Either him or Chap did. I can't remember which of them. Both used to smoke pipes. And Bromhead definitely suffered from post-traumatic stress, what we now call post-traumatic stress, after the Battle of Rorke's Drift, where he got his VC. Became quite a loner, and yeah, as I said, didn't like to talk to people about the battle at all. And actually, if it was raised in the mess, he'd get up and walk out. Didn't want to know about it. Didn't want to talk about it. So it was cancer of the tongue. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Someone saying British American cancer of the tongue. How hideous. Yeah, it is. But if you're interested in the Battle of Rorke's Drift, Zulu Wars, that sort of thing, that I've got a link to one of my videos about the Battle of Rorke's Drift. Also, I've done a video and a link again below to what happened to the Victoria Cross recipients after the Battle of Rorke's Drift. Because, well, we just heard about one of them dying in India. Another one, if you remember, Corporal Shees from the Natal native contingent, Frederick Shees. He first South African, actually, or first person from a South African military unit to be awarded Victoria Cross. Interesting. But he actually was found destitute in Cape Town, suffering from cold and malnutrition. And there was a whip round. He didn't tell anyone that he was, but the word came out, "You're the Victoria Cross hero from Rorke's Drift." And jeepers creepers, look at you. There was a whip round. They actually got him a passage to England on a ship. But unfortunately, he died off the coast of Angola and was buried at sea. So he was a sad one. There were a lot of other sad ones as well. There was one veteran ended up in Manchester and ended up in the workhouse and was buried. When he died, he was buried in a pauper's grave. I think that was, was that John Williams? Might have been John Williams. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I think it was. But some very interesting ones. Of course, Henry Hook, VC, died down in Gloucester. And of course, Private Hitch, if you remember Private Hitch ended up being a hackney cab driver in London. And when he died, he was buried at Chiswick Cemetery. When he died, there was a massive procession of hundreds of London cabs for his funeral procession in when he died. So there we go. But anyway, Gonville Bromhead, VC, died in 9th of February 1892. And then just to finish the week off for you, we have the 10th of Feb, 1567, Lord Darnley, Mary Queen of Scots' husband, was assassinated. And the finger pointed very closely, if it wasn't at Mary, it was at her lover, the Earl of Bothwell. But Lord Darnley, pretty nasty piece of work in many respects, but they were related. They were cousins. And she'd married Lord Darnley, an estranged marriage. He was the father of James VI of Scotland, James I of England. But by the time he had actually killed, he was terribly jealous of Mary Queen of Scots and jealous of a very jealous husband who fundamentally wanted to be king. He wanted to be called King of Scotland, and she wouldn't allow it. She said, "No, you're not the king. I'm the queen." And anyway, one of his sort of real piece of resistance, while she was still pregnant with little baby James, as he became, he actually entered her chambers. It's not a bedroom, her chambers like almost like an apartment, and seized her secretary, who he believed was having an affair with Mary, and stabbed him to death there and then in the apartment in front of his pregnant wife. Strangely enough, the marriage didn't go. There was no reconciliation after that. He was living separately from her in Edinburgh, and on the night of the 10th of February 1567, the house in which he was living in was blown up. Interestingly, they found his body in the garden outside, and it seemed to have been strangled. So there is a belief that actually, even though he was sort of survived the explosion, but he was set upon by probably Bothwell supporters in the gardens and strangled. He probably was near to death anyway after the explosion, but they made sure that there was no way back for him. Anyway. Did the Romans? Michael, was the marriage to Dudley? Do you mean Darnley? Forced? Mary seems to have been bad with men. Yes. So you are talking about Darnley. Yeah, the marriage to Darnley. No, actually, it wasn't forced. She was very headstrong. Elizabeth I, as Queen of England. Interestingly, Darnley was English. He was a member of the House of Stuart. He was born in England, so technically he had a foot in both camps, as it were. And Elizabeth basically said that he couldn't marry Mary. Mary basically just stuck two fingers up and married him, whisked him up to Scotland and married him. So no, definitely wasn't forced. She actually thought she was in love and had this this wonderful, very tall man, very tall, athletic man. What she didn't realise, there was another side to him. It's not all about looks, is it, folks? Right. And let me just finish off then. Oh, we just talked about Lord Darnley and Mary. We'll come back. There's a link in a minute. But 10th of Feb, 1763, Treaty of Paris ends the 7-Year War and ends fundamentally French control in Canada. Quebec was officially ceded in the Treaty of Paris of 1763. Quebec was ceded to Britain. And the French were relegated to just a few small islands off Newfoundland, which they still control now. And that was ultimately the beginning of Canada. And what was really interesting, I did a talk about this ages and ages ago, is here was Britain on the up. 1763, Treaty of Paris, the French on the back foot. They'd lost Canada. Britain now basically had North America to itself, apart from Florida down in... in fact, actually, no, sorry, they got Florida out of the Treaty of Paris as well. But they got... so they were in control of North America, north of Mexico, okay, and north of California. But... and they also now were in control after the 7 Years' War of most of India. And the French were on the back foot. And within a matter of years, 14 years, the pendulum swung the other way. The American colonists sought independence and fought for independence and got it from Britain. So Britain, for that one moment in 1763, had North America at her feet. And in less than 15 years, it was all going up in smoke. So, yeah, interesting. Interesting how history turns. Interesting how history turns. And of course, one of the officers who fought for Britain in the 7 Years' War in North America was a young George Washington. So there you go. Maybe I need to do the 7 Years' War sometime. And I know some of my American fans want me to have a British take on the wars of independence, the American War of Independence, or the Revolutionary Wars, as it's sometimes called. And I think that'd be fascinating, because contrary to Mel Gibson's film, The Patriot, it wasn't quite as one-sided as, I'm going to be really, my American fans are going mad now, but it wasn't quite, glorious, wholesome Americans versus nasty redcoats sent over from England. It was the first American Civil War in many respects, a war which, in fairness, the French in Quebec didn't join in, because they were told by the Catholic Church, you need to respect the monarch, not republics. And the French stayed loyal. They didn't do very much, but they stayed loyal and didn't join in the revolution down in America. And of course, don't forget that the British troops in America, there were a hell of a lot of Germans serving there as well, principally from Hesse. So anyway, there you go. So, and then last but not least for this week, okay, folks, we talked about Mary Queen of Scots and Lord Darnley, a marriage definitely not made in heaven, but actually one that probably was on the 10th of February, 1840. Queen Victoria married Prince Albert. And yeah, there you go. Victoria and Albert, as it were. Not just not just the museum. Spawned a whole tribe of children, and from them grandchildren, and Queen Victoria's web of relatives through the European royal families was unbelievable by the time she died. And it was an attempt in many respects to shore up support for Britain, use the royal family to protect Britain, give Britain strategic advantages in Europe. Interesting. But there you go. And they would, unlike one similarity with Lord Darnley, was that Albert was never made king. He was never king. He was called the Prince Consort, and never king. And of course, he died in the 1860s, and Queen Victoria was absolutely distraught when he died, which of course is not quite how Mary Queen of Scots was when Lord Darnley croaked it at Kirkerfield in Edinburgh. So there you go, folks. I hope you've enjoyed that. And I guess one last thing would be to say, any particular subject you'd like me to cover, put them in now. Quick, get real fast type, okay? Because I'm going to sign off in a moment. I'm going to let you type in so I can just see anything that comes up. But thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your support, especially thanks to all of you who have taken the time and the effort to support my members channel, because I'm going to look at whether we do a few more of these lives through the members channel as well. Maybe some of these talks. But thank you to those of you who are supporting my members channel. Interestingly, it's not just a money-making venture, the members channel. This whole history chat thing, of course. Yeah, I'm putting my heart and soul into it. If I'm really honest, I'm loving it. This video that I'm putting out later about the Roman invasion of Britain, AD 43. Chris Gorn said the Malayan emergency. I've done one about that, Chris. Have a look on my channel. Okay, it's there. But it takes a lot of stuff. I mean, for instance, I bought this microphone this week. That was 120 quid. I've got a pop filter. I'm not using it here, but a pop filter that takes out all the pop sounds in your voice, or takes away a lot of them. I'm investing in a whole lot of technology now to help me speed up all my writing and my script writing, and also my script editing and editing of videos, because of course the more I do that, and that's what I'm going to put the money towards from things like the memberships. Okay, so thank you for those of you who do, because the quicker I can do all that stuff, quite frankly, the more stories I can give you. And that's why I'm doing it. I love sharing my passion for British history with you. I love bringing British history to life through great stories. And I guess because you're still here with me after an hour, you do too. So thank you very much indeed for all your support. And please don't forget a thumbs up. Those of you who haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. I'm just looking here. From Gallipoli to Patriot to Braveheart, all completely true. Yeah. Thanks, Tim. I don't think. Just whizzing back up here. Maybe we need to do one Patriot Stunk. Thank you very much, Leslie. Yeah, I've watched it. It really was. I mean, not because I'm British. It just really was quite a lousy film, if I'm honest. There you go. What did the Romans ever do for us? Mary fell for the bad boy. She certainly did. Charlie. Oh, sorry. Oh, we've got what were the? Yeah, okay. Beg your pardon. About the flying aces. Flying aces. I might very well do flying aces, and I've definitely got Albert Ball, teenage flying ace from First World War, coming up. Do you know, by the time he died at the age of 20. He got his first kill when he was still a teenager. By the time he was 20, he'd been awarded the Victoria Cross, two Distinguished Service Orders, and the Military Cross. He was only 20 when he died. He had 44 confirmed kills by the age of 20 as a flying ace in the First World War, and 25 unconfirmed kills. An amazing young man from Nottingham. So he is the first of the fighter aces that I will be talking about, and I do plan one in the not too distant future on Douglas Bader, Reach for the Sky, as well. Harry Papworth, thank you very much, and Henry Blog. Jen, you mentioned that one to me before. It's in my list. Raid on the Medway. Tim, yes, it was almost like Britain's or the Royal Navy's Pearl Harbor moment. Not quite as a surprise, but equally as humiliating to actually have your fleet up the River Medway. Funny enough, we're going to be talking about the Medway in my video about the Romans, because that's where the big battle took place. But the British, the Royal Navy was up the Medway. The Dutch, it was protected by forts. The Dutch Navy turned up, captured the forts, and then proceeded to sail down the Medway with their battleships and basically blast the Royal Navy out of the water. Captured the flagship of the Royal Navy, the Royal Charles, took it back to the Netherlands across the North Sea with them. The Border Reivers, yes, they'd be a good one as well, wouldn't they? That'd be a fast Norman conquest of Ireland, Uncle Heavy. Yeah, I'd like to touch on Ireland. Got to do it sensitively, but I've always said most Brits this side of the Irish Sea don't know much about Irish history at all, and the Norman conquest of Ireland would be good. It'd be a good subject. Maybe give us your top 10 history films. Ooh, that'd be a good one. I have to think about that. Zulu's got to be up there. Khartoum as well. I think Khartoum's far actually much closer. It's a lot closer to the truth than Zulu was. But there you go. Two great films. I'm I might do that. I like that one. Longest day. Got to be up there as well, isn't it? Anyway, love your World War One air stories. Okay, raid on Scapa Flow. Another one. Yeah, another embarrassment for the Royal Navy. 4 days battle. Thank you. Oh, we're into American. John Paul Jones' American invasion of Whitehaven. Sarah Jane said that one. I'm surprised. Jen, you're up in Cumbria. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned that. Yeah, John Paul Jones, the British, the Americans, the Yanks are here. Yeah, the raid on Whitehaven. That would be a good one. A fascinating story. And yeah, and of course there are some other great stories about the Americans in Britain. I want to also tell the story. I've got it on my list up there of the Battle of Bamber Bridge in the Second World War. A shootout, an Americans versus Americans shootout, shootout in England, in Lancashire during the Second World War. We can't call it the last battle on English soil, be too much, but really interesting story about race relations in the American Army, US Army in the Second World War. Fascinating little story. Basher Bill and the Basher Bill and the harrying of the North. As you can tell from some of the stuff I'm doing on the Romans, folks, okay, what I would like to do is intersperse all my different stories. It's almost like a bit like a timeline thing of British history. I like to start to move it forward slowly so that some of the stories and some of the things you come across when you read, when you visit places, there's almost like a reference point in the history chap to go back and think, oh, okay, the Norman invasion, what was that about? Yeah, the Irish, the Norman invasion of Ireland, what was that about? And the Romans in Britain, what was that about? Boudica, the Lost Legion, the Lost Eagle of the 9th. All those stories. It'd be great just to be able to put them into some sort of context. So I'd like to do a few more of those as well. Okay. The story of Thomas Paine. And interestingly, Thomas Paine was born this week. Can't remember when, but in the 18th century. But Thomas Paine was born this week, by the way. Lothar von Richthofen was given credit for Bald, for killing Bald. His body in plain, but yeah. Wow, there's some great ones there. Thank you very much, folks. Right, it's now time for me to get my bum into gear and go and get this video done for you about and finish it off about the Roman invasion of Britain, the Battle of Medway, Emperor Claudius arriving with his war elephants, and a certain leader of British resistance who isn't a queen. I'm going to be talking as well about Caractacus, the Scarlet Pimpernel of the ancient Britons. So with that, I'm going to love you and leave you. Have a brilliant weekend wherever you are in the world, and won't be with you next Friday. Just got to say that now, heads up now. Won't be with you next Friday. I'll be in London. Sarah and I, we're going to go and see The King and I on Thursday down in London. We're going to stay over, and so we'll be heading back sometime on Friday. So unless I get back, I'm sure we're coming back late. Sarah's booked the trains. I can't remember what time. But so I won't be with you next Friday, but I will be in 2 weeks' time. So in the meantime, wherever you are, thank you very much for joining me today. Take care, and I'll see you very soon. Not least with the Roman video. See you later.